Hi, Bentley.
Marc-Antoine. How are you doing?
Morning. A bit exhausted, but I'm good.
Is that all the work for Society Library you're doing?
Yeah. Some of it for them, some of it for myself up to a point, but yes, mostly these past few days has been for them. So
I'm tired as well, but that's because I'm on some pretty strong antibiotics.
it's
So,
also a good reason.
yeah.
I invited someone new.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hello, hello.
Hi, Ben. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Good to see you both.
As well. Uh, Somebody contacted me about Hyperknowledge, and I told her, "Oh, you should come to the CDL meeting." So let's see if they show up.
And I missed the word. They contacted you from
About Hyperknowledge, it's
Hyperknowledge.
which is
I'm
my
not sure I'm
project.
familiar with what Hyperknowledge is.
Yes, well, I should have. I guess I should be giving news about my projects. I guess we're all doing that here. Though Hyperknowledge has been a bit on hiatus these past few months, so it's a bit. Oh well. Sorry, I'm just checking my email. Yeah, Emmanuel Mehari, I hope he comes. But it's just the three of us right now, so let's. Yes, here's Emmanuel. So I'll introduce Emmanuel.
I'm pretty sure Michael Gartner will be joining us as well. But we spoke about us both joining today, so
Yeah.
still make it.
Hi, Emmanuel.
Hey, how's it going?
All right.
My name is Amanu. Nice to meet you both. I just spoke with Mark. How do you want me to say it? Marc-Antoine?
Very good. Very
Uh,
good.
yeah, we just met this morning, and yeah, it's great to meet you too. So I've seen some of the YouTube videos that you're in, and so I've just kind of been getting acclimated to this space a bit.
And my name
So
is Ben. I'm also kind of getting acclimated to the group. I joined for the first time this last meeting.
cool.
Um, and I'm excited to share some updates since then. But I've been creating software that automates research on pros and cons. Essentially, you throw in a claim and it goes and finds pros and cons and um, the arguments for and against.
Cool.
That's good. The yeah, I guess a lot of us are doing that. Let's wait for quorum. A few more minutes. Here's Carl.
Hi.
Yeah.
Do you think we have quorum, or do you think we should wait a bit more?
I I I think we could probably start. We'll probably be telling a bit about ourselves that everyone except for Amanu and Benjamin might not know. So um, I think everyone else will be able to catch up pretty quick. Oh, there's Michael. So that's probably quorum at that point.
Well,
Oh, Michael,
Hello, how's it going?
going well, going well.
I just watched the video from last month, so I feel like I was talking to you, but I wasn't.
And I've seen some of the videos you're in, so it's kind of fun how we can silently build a relationship. But yeah, good.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. We talked about we have Amanu here, who's new. Benjamin's fairly new, and so we talked about going over our, what everyone else is working on and the convoluted scene of everything. And then we also talked about, how I think the topic we were maybe going to talk about was financial sustainability of our projects. So all those topics are on the floor. Maybe in the least, it would be good to take a couple minutes or a few minutes on each person to say what they're doing. And then we can decide whether we want to dive more into that or talk about finances. And there was a question to Marc-Antoine about what hyperknowledge is. So if you want to practice explaining that again.
I can. And anyway, let me start the round. Why not? Okay, so my name is Marc-Antoine. I've been in the CDL for what's been 4 years now, I think. 3-4 years.
All right.
My starting point was collective intelligence and massive collective intelligence. How do we get a readable map of all the contributions of someone to a structured conversation? And I say structured conversation as opposed to argument mapping, because I think argument is just one structure for structured knowledge. There's causality entailment, there's taxonomies, there's all the argumentation frame mapping, it's all relevant. And I think it should all coexist in a big information soup. So hyperknowledge's aim is to model this global conversation. On the one hand, there's an aspect that is, I got really interested into event sourcing, not just as a technology, but as a metaphor for how we build knowledge. There's we each make those statements, and those statements revise something we've said before or someone else has said, and there's layers of interpretations and there's layers of, but it's still discrete events of accreting knowledge. And we try to create this very vague, what is a concept out of that? Like entities are easy to pinpoint, but concepts are extremely hard to pinpoint. And the reality is I can use a concept for a while and then realize, oh, now I mean it in a slightly different way, or there's this distinction I was not aware of, and where there was one identifier for one concept, now there's 2, 3, 4 different sub-variations of it. And I may want to go over my past statements and retrospectively say, well, I was talking about this variant of that concept all along, or maybe selectively. So new notion of identifier, how do we aggregate and federate streams of statements? And that also means there's never going to be one representation of the state of belief. There's we're speaking about social truth. How many people believe that? How many people believe something is certain, plausible, unbelievable, controversial? And it's a very different way of modeling data when you're doing this modeling of collective belief. So I'm very much of the advice that there needs to be an infrastructure, a very different kind of infrastructure for this federation. I'm trying to define it as a kind of data structure and protocol, so we can start exchanging on this kind of more complex structured belief. I'm a huge believer in the aim of the CDL to have a more structured canonical point of convergence for knowledge, but I believe this is asymptotic and it's always going to be something we drive towards. It's never going to be finished. And the question is, how do we negotiate in the meantime the federation of not quite compatible knowledge? Concretely, I have a prototype of little dynamic data structure aggregator for stream data. That's the Hyperknowledge GitHub project. I'm working a lot with Society Library on their mapping tool, and here on something that is much more classical. Hi, Tim. We're going rounds, so you'll hear stuff you've heard before. What I'm doing for them is basically a RAG. So it's about having this library of documents and doing embeddings on each paragraph and being able to say, well, can we use this as a basis for identifying, building a map? We're not there yet, but at least saying, here's a claim. What is the basis for that claim? What are the documents that have to do with that claim with their quotes? So that's the kind of stuff I'm doing for Society Library. They're doing very much generative. Here's a question. What are the positions you can have? What are the arguments pro and con these positions? So they've pushed this very far. By the way, Ben, and this is something to discuss with them, and you should compare notes with them. The generative, but trying to meet between the top down, let's generate everything, and the bottom up, let's see what's in the corpus to try to find a meeting point. That is really where the work lies right now. And my interest is, yes, that's important, but what's important is making this intelligible and making people more able to contribute to this, to understand the structures, as they're displayed in the more formal way, but also have them learn how to think more formally about all these argument structures. One other effort I'm involved in, and I'll stop there, is with Jack Park, who just came here. We're working on a gamification of getting people to contribute to an argument map, IBIS-style argument map, as a way to train them into learning the argumentation structure. So that's who I am and what I'm doing. Over.
Okay. And I think last time you mentioned the gamification aspect, but I missed Hypermind, or maybe misunderstood. But Hyperknowledge, sorry.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was some sort of term. I'm like, well, that sounds interesting, but it's what you're working on with Society Library. Awesome. It's cool.
No, the Society Library is this thing. That's Claim Minor. The Hyperknowledge is my project, and it's about having this mix of very arbitrary structures in a recursive hypergraph based on event sourcing. So that's what Hyperknowledge is about.
Okay. Structured conversation using flexible data structures that has something to do with events. To be honest, there's a little bit I'm confused on with that, but it sounds cool.
I'm packing a lot in very few words, sorry.
And that's what you get when you're trying to create complex systems, but
yes. Okay.
So if we want to continue going around, it might be easiest if I go next, unless anyone else really wants to. So I'm Bentley Davis. I've been in the Canonical Debate Lab since the beginning. I think just like a couple weeks before Marc-Antoine found us. And me and Tim, who's also in here, kind of, I think, I can't remember who else was at the Genesis, and it was just, we found out we were building very similar apps and had similar ideas, and Tim came up with the name. I've been working on, I had two friends arguing back in 2011, and I thought, well, I'll go look up the answer to this argument they're having on the internet. And that's when I realized that human beings are crap at making decisions. So you'd think before 30, I'd figured that out. Anyway, so kind of building a tool that helps bypass the limitations of humans' memory and math skills within our own brain, because we kind of do things intuitively and through heuristics. So giving a grounding that then you can use your intuition to feed information into it. So it's a combination of system one, system two thinking, and kind of circling back and forth. And it's a process. And incidentally, so once Marc-Antoine gets Hyperknowledge kind of up and running, I'm hoping that'll be like the core data infrastructure. I hope my system, which has my idea, which has is a way to score based on the evidence, not so much opinion. So it's a little bit different than Marc-Antoine's, although of course opinions in there as well. It's just a different emphasis. And that might be one of the interesting kind of game mechanics that could be used in what he and Jack are working on. And then it might be able to be fed by some of what Benjamin and Society Library are doing, and Michael also on here about figuring out how to get AIs to help us crunch this huge data set of the internet into something useful. But the main thing I'm kind of focusing on is kind of a way of representing the information in a visually intuitive way that gets people not just to know, well, they may not even have to know all the facts, but how are those facts impacting their final decision on how confident we are that a statement, a claim is true or false. Truth is kind of a triggering word, so maybe that's not a great way to say it, but our confidence that, you know, this statement accurately represents our perception of reality. Yeah, so it's right now I'm calling it Reason Tracker, but I have 50 different names. And one of the ways I think as far as making it financially self-sustaining is to make kind of a YouTube channel where you're creating videos, or, you know, other social media that has some sort of monetization and some sort of Patreon thing. So even if people aren't willing to use the tech I'm building, being able to create content and then just becoming a content creator as a stepping stone to then see, will people use these tools, and a way to build up the tool set. And then later on, you know, if there's a market for the tools, then people might pay to use it. But in my experience, that's been a hard thing to do or to prove. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And so the videos might be something like Evidence Explorers or something like that. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good rounding of my position in this space. So anyone want to jump in next? I don't know, Tim, if you want to come in
go
as one of the
next.
original founders.
Bentley, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I can go next.
Come on. Yep.
So I'll describe what I would like to be able to do. Like, if I don't do it, I would like someone to build this thing that where if I'm sitting down or wherever, lying down, I'm reading something or watching something, I'm reading an article or I'm watching an Instagram video. I don't use TikTok, but maybe someone could be watching TikTok video. That one of two things happens. Either I become aware of people I care about or people's opinion I care about. I'm interested in their feedback and what I'm starting to consume informationally. So, like, to be more specific, I see like a highlight in the page of, say, like a news article, and, you know, it gives me maybe a couple icons or numbers saying, you know, debated topic or whatever, you know, we don't have to get the details of what you could show, but, you know, very quick view. And then I can expose more information. Like, I can click it and be like, oh, okay, you know, people point out that this thing is sort of an implied assumption that's false, or maybe people, oh yeah, people find that, you know, this other research paper proves this statement that's in this place to be true. So that's one thing. I would like to be able to, as I'm reading it, you know, reading something, consuming information, I'd like to become aware of what other people, the work people have already done to like analyze and critique that information. And actually, let me back up. So I want to share with the group. So the way I've started to think a little bit about my project or about our goal is that I was reading a paper on, or I guess some documentation on Spanner recently, the database. And this person had a really interesting take on databases. They said databases are a sink of complexity. I was like, oh, that's a really interesting way to think of a database. It's a kind of an abstract or theoretical way to think of a database, but it's a place where a bunch of people spend effort putting a bunch of complex things in one place, so it's easy to use from the outside. And that's kind of what I want, but from like an informational perspective. Because let me talk about the flip side, which is I'm reading something and are consuming some information, no one, or I don't like what I'm seeing, or like I don't see, people are making the point I would like I question, well, is that true? And either no one has analyzed that claim that's present in the source, or maybe they have, but they haven't looked at it from the angle that occurs to me, it's from my own perspective. So I can spend the time, and maybe people in this group have done this, where you go and you research. Bentley, you mentioned going and doing this research. Yeah, you spend an hour, 2 hours. It's time consuming to research claims or facts. You find other sources, like another news article or a blog that points you to more primary sources, like research papers, and eventually hopefully you come to some conclusion. Like maybe your conclusion is that you don't know, or sometimes you come to some conclusion you do know, and you find a source or two or three that sort of backs up your claim. And so when I've been in that experience and I've done that work, it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? Can I store that information somewhere so someone else can sort of short circuit the path to of research that I did? So that complexity sink, and not just complexity sink, but human effort sink. Someone's put in this time. What's a system that collects that information? And it's a really hard problem. That's why I think we've all been scratching our heads over this for years, it seems like. How do you do that also because multiple people with different perspectives are doing the same time? How do you aggregate that? So that, when Bentley's speaking, when Marc-Antoine's speaking, I'm hearing, that we're all looking at the same problem, the same perspective. But yeah, that's sort of my take on what I want. I want to either get the information, and be able to critique and feedback, or I want to provide this research that I've been doing into some system, some platform that provides it. And I have a prototype platform up. It's called howju.com, HOWDJU, as in how'd you know that? Try to get people to think about why they believe what they believe, instead of just saying this is what I believe. It's got a docs page, but I won't go into that because it's a work in progress. But that's what I'd like. Yeah, social research platform. I call it crowdsourced fact checking, but social research is I think the exact same thing, just like a congruent rewording. I would agree with that. Yeah. That's me. I'm Carl, if I didn't say that.
Yeah, I guess I'm Tim High. I'm one of the founders here. I guess the other big person that's missing from here is Venrix, who doesn't like face-to-face meetings anyway and has been lurking for a long time. But he's still actively contributing to his platform, which is what is it called now? Debate Map, right? But the Society Library is largely built on his platform. And of course, Jamie from Society Library isn't here. And there are other people who have been around, but those are the oldest, I think. I mean, my ideas for this came from sometime around maybe the first Obama election or something. Elections always brought up this intense anxiety and need to essentially get to the bottom of issues that people were debating. Over the years, I've gotten to the point where I'm very sure they're not actually debating any issues. So that's a different question. And online, worrying about trolls, I'm talking about 15 years ago now, kind of trolls, where people would post something in a thread and you couldn't help but engage with them. And they would say things you thought were absurd, and I realized there was no point in debating them, but I also didn't want to just let them run around loose. And I wish I had something where I could just post a single link and say boom, this is how I feel. This is where everything I think comes from, boom, and walk away. Because then I could disengage. I did my duty of kind of placing my thoughts there and move along without having to continue feeding the trolls. And of course, there's no way to really do that, right? Still to this day, right? The other approach that I come from is kind of from a different direction, which is like an information architecture. I see this more and more as an information architecture problem. And I think Carl hit on that a lot, about shared research and deduping, complexity sinks and so on. So much of the design around the canonical debate is around deduplicating arguments, collecting all possible sides of an issue in one place that you could go look and share. And whenever somebody has something to add to the debate, they add it once and it's done, right? You don't need to keep making the same argument over and over again. So that is the question, is why is it that the internet and our knowledge is not organized in a way that builds upon itself? We always talk about standing on the shoulders of giants and so forth, but the way that we do it is so messy and disorganized that there's so much more efficiency we could find if we just built the tool to organize it better, right? So that's a lot of what I try to think about and focus on, is how do we collect the knowledge in a single place in a way people know how to navigate and find, and we don't have duplicates, and we're always adding information rather than repeating. I mean, I came, as we all more or less have come to the conclusion that there is no one truth, and there's no, well, Bentley asterisk. You're never going to win an argument or convince, you're never going to finish a debate. Let's put it that way. And you need to allow people to come to have their own separate conclusions, and come to their own separate conclusions. And any attempt to do otherwise alienates, right? And so one of the other main things I focus on as one of the primary design requirements is trustworthiness, right? And not just trustworthiness like blockchain or whatever, where it's mathematically provable, but also that people trust it. People have to be able to trust the source of information, and have to, most importantly, trust that it hasn't been tampered with, and no one's biasing, and no one's cheating. So in other words, the word canonical again comes to the definition of, deduplicated in one source for all this. And one thing that must be avoided at all costs is a forking of the information, such that you no longer are collecting all the information in one place. And one way I see it happening all the time is if anybody tries to control the debate and say, oh, this side won, whoever lost, the reaction is going to be, okay, I'm taking my toys home, going home and starting my own little debate map or whatever, right? So much of the design has to be around people trusting what's there, and trusting that nobody's trying to game it. And the way that happens is that you don't allow people, how do I say this? If there's a reason you don't trust a piece of information, sure, if there's evidence, you don't have to agree with the evidence. You don't have to trust the evidence. And your mechanism for dealing with that distrust or disbelief in that is to argue against it, right? But the kind of distrust in the system would be belief that people are hiding information. So the system has to completely make fully transparent all the information that's been provided. It has to be a clear path from somebody contributing information to seeing their information appearing in that site. Their contribution has to be there. Otherwise, they suddenly think, oh, they're censoring me, right? I'm being whatever, shadow banned, or I'm being whatever. Certainly, from the blockchain side of truth and trust, there has to be mathematically provable ways to mathematically prove that nobody tampered with the system. Nobody removed parts of the information. Nobody changed the history so that, so all that has to be mathematically provable. But that's a lot of the kind of things I'm focusing on, is just how to create a system that both, that centralizes, isn't attached to a single organization, can't be accused of bias, because anything that's attached to an organization, well, then all you got to add to that is, and that organization is funded by George Soros, and you've lost like half your audience or whatever that is, right? So it can't be owned by an organization. It can't be tampered with. It has to be fully transparent. And it has to be designed to efficiently accumulate knowledge in a crowdsourced manner, right? Which is possibly an impossible challenge, but it's always about trade-offs. So we do our best. Yeah, and I've been absent for about, I don't know, 6 months, most of last year. I'm trying to get back into swing of things, but I've been doing a lot of my actual work. So yeah. Oh, and if you've read it at all, I wrote the white paper. It's like 7 years old now. It's pre-Chat GPT. Even I'm behind the curve in terms of adapting our work to Chat GPT, which is a whole separate thing. I think my bottom line on that right now is there's some great things about advances in AI, and there's a great danger in our work as well. It's an amazing tool for our work and a huge danger of obfuscating our work, because the better AI gets at simulating reasoning for us, the less we perhaps need it done for ourselves and to see every step. Like the more it seems to be doing a better job than we could do on our own, and has enough confirmation bias, the more we get to trust AIs with our confirmation bias. And then we have even more of a splitting of people with their preferred AIs, and perhaps debating with the confirmation biased AI satisfies your desire to debate and prevents people from actually coming together. So we need even more to anchor it. Like the Canonical Debate Lab hopefully serves to anchor any sort of AI to the full realm of human thought and allow people to delve down. Yeah. Anyone else? Who's next?
I can go next if we want. But what I have been working on is, or at least the initial idea was to create one platform, kind of like Carl described, which a bunch of people can put in ideas. We got the complexity sync, and it's just like all arguments in one place. You put it in, it shows up everywhere, and you can just see both sides at any granularity. However, kind of what probably, or I'm trying to stand out with, or like what would set me as part, would be that I'm creating tools to automate some of that research and have had some success in that already. And so over the summer, I worked with a few friends from college, and we have created software that takes a claim, can go scan the internet for what's being argued for and against, and then scan the argument again, or the internet again, to find like specific evidence for and against each of those arguments. So like we have the claim, we have subclaims, and then we have like the supporting quotes that support those subclaims. And so it pulls from like research papers, news articles, things like that. And it sounds like Society Library is also doing something in that area. I haven't compared to see like how those compare, but that's kind of what I've been focusing on. Recently, I just got to talk with the lead data engineer at Ballotpedia. And for those who aren't familiar with it, Ballotpedia seeks to collect candidate information all in one place, so people can make good decisions there. And so I'm starting to develop some research tools for them, specifically for finding candidate contact information. But what I'm hoping to do is just start develop a relationship, and ideally get to a point where I can kind of pitch the pro-con searcher, because they do pros and cons of policy, not super well organized or anything like what we're doing, but they do that, and they have a much larger audience. So they've kind of, which I didn't actually recognize how big of an audience they have. They've like reached half of American voters during 2020 is what they mentioned on their site, and they got like millions of page views each each month. And so what I'm hoping to do is like provide good software for them, develop a relationship, and eventually pitch either one, creating automation for their policy pages, or possibly like pitching, expanding to a canonical aspect, but would need to prove the financial viability and engagement with that, which I think I've done on small scale. It's just like growing things is the hard part. But otherwise, my thoughts are similar to Bentley, just with the best way to probably fund this would be like creating content via YouTube or a newsletter and try to grow it through that. Which has its own set of challenges. But if anyone's interested, I know some professional YouTubers and got to talk with some CEOs of newsletters. So I have some connections there.
Definitely, you'll want
that's
to
my
meet
thoughts
Gieringer.
thus far with funding.
I
Definitely
have
you
to
want
go.
meet
That
Gieringer.
already sounded, sorry, I'm interrupting. I gotta go. That sounded really interesting and I'd like to follow up. And I'm sorry I didn't get to meet the rest of you, but I'll try to follow up later.
Good seeing you, Tim.
I can go next if it
Go for it.
works. So I work on discourse graphs, which is described as like a decentralized knowledge exchange protocol. It's primarily being used in scientific communication to take the scientific like articles and break them down into like modular discrete parts, and then creating relationships between them. So questions, claims, evidence, and sources, and then creating relations between them, but doing that in your workspace. So while you're taking notes and having your meetings and doing your research and just typing away, you can create those relationships between them to resurface them later. And eventually the idea is to be able to push and pull discourse graphs between platforms. So right now I work on the Rome research one. A logsec one just got kind of beta released, but eventually like Obsidian and Notion and Tana. So kind of like the GitHub of scientific communication. And some of the future plans as well are to like take a subset of your graph and then be able to publish it as a website or like a micro publication in the scientific. Tana is a new tool for thought that's been created that's pretty impressive. So I think it's like tana.inc or something is the website. And personally, I have interest in how to present like a local argument on a visual map, like a canvas, and something like TLDraw or React Flow, and being able to communicate your idea to someone who isn't in your domain. And I think that's a difficult problem that a lot of people are trying to solve, and I'm also very interested in it. And also currently, I think some of the direction I want to take is trying to go down that like auto researcher route that you mentioned, Benjamin, in the last meeting. So like maybe like a Chrome extension that's a combination of like Marc-Antoine's Claim Miner and whatever you're working on there, Benjamin. So a user could just go to a source and be able to extract that information. And then from there, deciding what to do with it, whether it's creating a canvas that they can share or like an artifact they can share, or importing it to their own workspace or what have you. So that's me.
I can go next. So my name's Amanu. I'm very new to the space relatively. I've only been working on this for the past 2 months, and I wasn't aware that everyone else is, or there are other people that are working on this. So it makes me very, very happy because I do see this as one of the most important things we can solve. And what I try and do with everything is break it down to the systems that enforce that structure. And, you know, as you keep going backwards, you get to solving the root of the issue. And so I think even in the context of what we're doing, something I'm wondering is how can we get more people involved in this, right? And you're talking about content creation, and I have a relatively small platform, about 30,000 people on TikTok. And so what I want to do is open up this door to get more people involved. And the reason I've kind of been hesitant is how do you organize these people, right? Which is why I kind of wanted to do this in the first place. Part of it was that building the structure would serve as a task management tool. You have somewhere where people can find information and get summaries about where the overall project is at, and then they can also find individual nodes or where they can contribute. And so I've kind of been struggling to figure out how do I word this, because a lot of people, it just doesn't make sense to them, at least the importance. So that's something I'm working on. But specifically, I'm very involved with the interface that would go into something like this, because what I see with a lot of the pre-existing ones, and what I originally started with as a flow chart or kind of like this constellation, is that it's visually overwhelming and not a lot of the visual information is necessarily relevant to what you're trying to do. And so I've kind of, I view it as something that kind of has to have maybe 2 screens. There's a 2D thread, like a Reddit kind of style threading. And that would be heavily embedded with hypertext. But the problem there is now the colors of everything kind of being hypertext is overwhelming. So I thought of a way to be able to toggle that on and off, so it appears as regular text, and then you can kind of get more information within that text if you toggle something. And then on the other side, you would have that map, but it wouldn't necessarily look like a flow chart. It would be kind of sets of columns, and though you could scroll through those columns, and then there's a small kind of global map, you could call it, which I just came up with earlier, so I'm still testing it, but I imagine it would be a series of dots that would let you know how far down a chain you are, because the hardest part that I struggle with is getting lost within, because I'll just keep diving deeper and deeper and you don't know how to find your way back. So I thought of kind of this dot system where am I getting too technical right now? Is this okay?
Nope, that's perfect. Keep going.
Okay. So I thought of this dot system. I can share my screen if that will help.
Yeah, feel free.
Okay.
We're mostly software engineers on here, actually. So
okay. I actually am not a programmer. I used to do HTML, CSS, but I left all that behind a couple of years ago. And so yeah. So another thing I didn't mention was how I think that we need to have a fixed z-axis within all of this that you can kind of traverse back and forth, so kind of layers. And this was kind of the dot system I was talking about before, where as you're going down, you can see what other options are available within everything that you've left behind. If that makes sense. And then as you're kind of traversing it, it would look, these are kind of what the columns could look like. And everything obviously has more information, so you need to be able to either pop out one specific thing that you're looking at and kind of have everything get darkened in the background. And if you want to see everything in detail, then yeah. So I'm still kind of working on all of this, but that's where I'm at.
And just as an aside, I'm developing apps inside Miro. So if you ever need like a little control panel or something to augment what you're doing, I have a lot of experience in that. So
Cool. I don't even know what that means, honestly, but it sounds interesting.
I guess I could, trying to think. Yeah, I mean, in the Miro marketplace, you do apps that other people build, and I work with the company that has it's refractive strategy, and they have the I forgot the name of it at the moment. but anyways, I'm always developing code inside Miro to control the positioning of things and add new content to the board automatically.
Okay, that sounds cool. Yeah, I like that. Thanks. And
I don't know,
so
or Amanu, do you have more that you want to go over?
well, yeah, I just, the last thing I wanted to say is kind of I really like what Tana's doing with their thread structure and kind of how they visualize, how deep you are into something and where there's more information. And I think that's kind of what we need to focus on with all of this is how we can imply that there's more information rather than just giving people all of the information all at once. So yeah, that's everything.
It's awesome. Thank you. I don't know, Jack, if you want to say any more than Marc-Antoine already kind of mentioned some of the stuff you're working on.
No, I just wanted to say that, among other things, that this is one of the most lively CDL meetings I've been in. There's some really, really, really powerful thinking going on. The UX that Amanu is working on is staggeringly awesome. I'd like to have his talents working on some of the projects we're working on. So, but I want to say this. Marc-Antoine has been Marc-Antoine and I met in a meeting with Ward Cunningham once, and Marc-Antoine ended up coming to Dubrovnik, Croatia, when he heard that I was going to be there for a Knowledge Federation conference. And we've kind of been hanging out together ever since, because there's so much he's doing and I'm doing, and in fact, the entire CDL group is doing, that's aimed at organizing human communication. And so that's the roots of all of this. Marc-Antoine learned about topic maps from me, because that's kind of what I was doing in my PhD research. The idea was this: if you're going to have structured conversations and people end up saying the same thing, just in using different words, you can improve the view to the users, the final readers, by collapsing the redundant stuff. The example that I give is, if I ask this question, what are the causes of climate change? And somebody says CO2 causes climate change, and somebody else says climate change is caused by carbon dioxide, most English-speaking, English native people understand they both said the same thing. They just used different sentence structures and different words. And so my PhD work was to find a way to collapse those. And topic maps gives you the merging structures to say, oh yeah, those are the same. And so that's what I was working on. Well, Marc-Antoine picked up on that and took it to the next level with this thing he calls hyperknowledge. And his focus, to me, this is my interpretation, I'm not putting words in Marc-Antoine's mouth. My interpretation is that he's heavily focused on this notion of subject identity. I'll give you the example. My name is Jack Park. Well, it turns out that I went into my auto shop one day and I said, is my car ready? And they said, who are you? And I said, Park. And they said, which one? And I said, Jack Park. And they said, which one? Well, that's because there's a whole shitload of Koreans out there that have picked up the name Jack Park when they come to America. And there's also Jack Park of the European, the Caucasian kind as well. But the question is, which Jack Park? And so you've got to do this whole thing about deciding what the meanings of words are, and they are context specific. And so this business of knowledge representation and AI is so much bigger than word vectors and other things that are going on in LLMs. And that's the space that Marc-Antoine and I are pushing. And it applies heavily to when you start doing dialogue maps of any kind, be they argument maps or concept maps or whatever. You're always interested in what are the meanings, the exact meanings, the precise meanings of what's presented to you. And so that's the nature of what I bring to this table. I'm not a UX guy. The UX, the user experiences that I end up designing are pretty gross, pretty ugly. But Marc-Antoine and I asked Marc-Antoine to be the lead architect on a project which was to bring IBIS conversations to the web. Jeff Conklin once told me, I asked him, could we put this on the web? And he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, because people lack the conversational literacy to work within the structure. Now, Jane McConigal hauled off and designed a structured conversation research platform she called Foresight Engine. And it is, in fact, an IBIS platform with its own UX. And it became pretty clear that people could not work within the the structure that was given to it. Most people picked it up quickly, but there was always the stragglers that misused the nodes. They would use a con node or to say something positive, that sort of thing. So we're all in this mess together. How do we make it so that people can fluidly fall into this space of conversation and make it work? So what I decided was that the way to do IBIS conversations on the web was to put people inside guilds, World of Warcraft style guilds. And the guild leadership is responsible for making sure that what goes out to the game board, the public game moves, are according to the necessary structure of the conversation, and they're also civil and as literate as can be. And so people go into the guilds and they become role players, and they learn skills, and then they level up to new skills and level up to new skills. And the idea is that inside the guilds, they are learning how to be conversationalists. They're also learning how to be collaborative. They're learning how to do deep listening. They're learning all of the skills necessary. So that's the background on the platform. Well, I have to say that Marc-Antoine has taken these initial ideas that I had and blown them into something vastly more powerful. And so that's the nature of the work going on. I'll stop there.
So much work in progress, though. But yes, if I may, I'll go again, summarizing it from another way, from another angle. We all have structures for mapping ideas, and all these structures are adapted to specific use cases. What I'm wondering about is, can we have a good way to exchange data that allows to map these structures to one another and superpose those structures on one another and build those structures one upon another, so that everything we individually do with our little filter of how data should be structured can be useful to other structuration tools and create an ecosystem of tools that build on one another. That's my meta goal. Over.
Awesome. I think that's everyone. We only have about 10 minutes left. Although we can go long. I mean, it's not like we have any real restrictions. So does anyone want to dive into anything specifically discussed, or do people want to talk financial stability? Carl?
I was going to ask about fixed z-axis. I don't know what it means, but I'm curious about it. If someone could describe what it means, and yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially just like layers, like in Photoshop. So there's something behind something else, but you can't go like free, because when you say 3D, people think that it's like the way we perceive 3D, where you can float around anywhere. And I
Okay,
think
yeah,
that's too much.
I get you. Yeah, so there's like kind of discrete Z layers, but it's not like you can move things, rotate them and move them around. Yeah, okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Also called 2.5D.
Oh, really?
I've heard some people call it that.
Cool, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Clearly better. I don't believe in full 3D myself. Layers are quite legible.
Yeah, and so what I was thinking is then it becomes like hard to know where there's more information, how many layers there are, and what kind of information they contain. So that's something I'm trying to work on implementing. But I do think something that we should maybe focus on is how can we get more people engaged in this conversation. And I think that if we were able to get really good at relatively concisely explaining this, then it's something that I could use my platform to put out and trying to get more people involved in this, because there's a lot of bright minds here, and I think that the more smart people, yeah, working on this, or the more people in general, yeah, working on this. Everyone has something to contribute, then the better the chance we have at solving it. Yeah, no, me too. That's went on
No, it isn't. The,
So
the other issue, of course, and I'm all for it, but the other issue is we don't have a good, and that's a problem we're trying to solve. We don't have a good way to compose thought, right? If you put a lot of people, that means we spend more time in the presentation layer, and we spend more time aligning ideas, and we spend more time, and we're trying to make that easier, to make the scaling up of collective intelligence more effective. But we don't have the recipe yet. That means inviting more people at this stage, and I'm happy you came, and I'm happy whenever people show up, it's new ideas, new energy, it's wonderful. But we're still trying to get the basics right, and we still need to retell that story every time, and we don't have all the solutions. It's a problem. Like a huge influx means more coordination time, and if we don't have the basis right, I'm not sure the trade-off is positive, though. Who knows? Right now I'm still happy to see more people. But yes, in
Because
graduated numbers,
there's a trade-off there, because
a trade-off.
that's part of the reason why, or like at first I was trying to get volunteers to help create pro-con content, and we got about the same rate as like Wikipedia would for the amount of readership to, or more than they did, but like in the end it would even out to about how much they have. But it's just we didn't have enough people like who know about it to have enough people writing to have enough content to attract more people, and so there is this chicken and the egg problem. Because like in the end, what we're doing is not just like organizing information; we're trying to organize the information for people. Like and so there's like a point, it's like when do we try to create or like design a perfect solution versus how much should be focused on like getting early users and use user feedback to like generate the rest of the system, because that'll probably be the best way. Or maybe I misunderstood.
No, I think you're absolutely right. We're speaking about two things. One is, I agree, we can't wait for the perfect platform, and I've been, promising something and not being able to finish it, but that's my thing. People who have platform need users, so that way getting people involved in that, brilliant, and getting people involved in making those platforms evolve, brilliant. I'm trying to build a meta platform. That's not ready, and that means a shared data format. That's not fully ready, though I'm getting closer. And this is where it needs to be a smaller committee, because I'm not at the point where I have a platform which can welcome users yet. So maybe I'm speaking more for my own case. Getting people on platforms is absolutely relevant, of course.
Yeah, my thought is kind of who do we want to attract at this stage? Because like getting a lot of people, I mean, first of all, I think having the same percentage of people that update Wikipedia, I think that's maybe the best we could actually ever hope for. I mean, realistically, a lot of people are taking care of their kids or their parents right now, and it's not worth their time. But for them to be able to consume the content and have the content easy to consume, which is something we're doing by deduping and everything. So gathering viewers and then gathering participants, that would be helpful to create the data, but I don't know that we have a place for them to put it right now. I guess we have quite a few systems, but they're all very, very challenging to use. And we're also asking them to do something that it's kind of like digging ditches. It is hard. And I guess that's where the promise of AI is coming from. And then maybe it's just then kind of a validation process as opposed to, you're making sure the holes of the ditch are good. I mean, the corners and everything, as opposed to having to do everything yourself. And then there could be inviting more people that are like us that want to build this system. And so I'm always up for that. But then, of course, every time we get someone in here, they have their own idea, and we still generally aren't collaborating. We have a couple. I mean, we are cross collaborating a bit, so that's getting better. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't know if that was helpful, but those are my thoughts.
I guess just to clarify, I 100% agree with what everyone's saying, because you throw too many people in here, it's not going to work. And so I have my own Discord server where I have the same problem, where everyone on the server is like, okay, let's get more people on here, and I'm like, we can't get more people on here because then we run into the problem that we're trying to fix, and not many people get that. So I guess then the next logical step for me would be, okay, you form a bunch of individual committees and have representatives come to one central place to exchange what they're developing. So I guess that's more what I wanted to get people on, is just not even inviting people here, just getting people to think about the question. Because for me, it wasn't even a question in my mind until recently. And I think just putting the question out there is the most important thing, and then kind of letting people work on it in their own ways, in their own places, and then maybe finding a central place.
One thing I've been thinking about for a long time, and I'm not the person to do it, unfortunately, because it's not my main core skills. We need association of collective intelligence tool builders. I keep saying collective intelligence researchers are terrible at collaborating. We need a better kind of association and club, and I mean, in a way, this is what here is. But I'd like this to be a formal organization, card carrying. There are existing collaborative intelligence associations. Many of them are kind of closed membership and very much, this is our own club. I'd like something very open, which may be distinct from, I said, let's solve the problem. That's one thing, but let's have the very open thing where we all meet and discuss. And maybe making that organization is something we should spend time on. But that's another endeavor.
It's like there seems to be like a couple of thoughts here in terms of people. So there's like one layer of like, we have this group and we need to take advantage of all the skills that we have and be able to like interlock them a little bit more, while still respecting that like there's value in being able to explore multiple different paths, and many of us are exploring different paths. But I think there's probably potential we haven't fully unlocked just because we haven't made the effort to be like, I have code, you have that, like you could benefit from, let's actually make the time to go and connect that. But also that takes time, and that's a big problem. So there's that level, and like if someone has some good ideas for that, maybe we can experiment that in future meetings. The next one is just getting more people part of this group, because more people come up with more ideas, devising more systems. Given we can collaborate well, that will have results. The final one is like the audience facing, because it doesn't matter what we do here unless people actually use what we have and we actually help people make better informed decisions on controversial issues. And so we do need to be constantly thinking about how do we actually make this valuable to people and grow it. And with a lot of our stuff, there's also within that a volunteer, people creating content, and a consumer, people reading content for crowdsourced platforms. But some of us are also moving towards like the research or the automated research, which has less of that, but still there needs to be people like fact checking the stuff that AI is spitting out, and people consuming. So there's like whole system level stuff there. But maybe the question is like, what is the most important level to focus on for our group right now that'll allow for more people to benefit from better content?
I mean, I think something that's been really interesting about this meeting is that I should only speak for myself, but I do kind of think a little bit for the group until Amanu showed up today. I don't know if any of us are stellar at UX or UI, but seeing Amanu's, mock-ups, I'm like, it's very exciting. And what I'm trying to say is, I think we should maybe have a meeting on UX or UI and just talk about like because that's the user's first introduction access into the system, and it's just how they interact. So I'd be curious going down that route. As you're all talking, I'm like trying to in my head, I'm like, okay, so we have UX, we have data layer, sort of like the representation that Marc-Antoine has done a lot of work on. We have, of course, like just the glue API stuff, the boring stuff maybe of connecting everything. We have the AI, and these are obviously huge simplifications, but just on top of my head, those four things are areas of focus that sound interesting and important.
I agree. We could have focused meetings on each of those.
And I wonder if we could benefit from like breakout rooms where people like, I need something, this person knows that, let's break out, and then other people can break out and have like more focused discussion. Wonder if that would be beneficial as well, to allow for that collaboration.
We had at some point where the CDL was much more active. We had not only we had meetings every Friday, and we had side topical meetings on other dates. Maybe that's a bit ambitious, but I'm thinking even if we're now have like one monthly meeting on Fridays, and that was supposed to be the plenary, but we did think we'd have other topical meetings on the other Fridays, and I still think that remains relevant.
The work
so maybe we should reinstate that. Yep.
And we can definitely give anyone access to the Google Calendar, and it will post just like it did today, saying an event. I don't know that the information will be accurate, but at least it'll post a reminder in the thing. Coordinating schedules is a pain, but oftentimes I think it's best just to like throw out a date and a time in the chat, and if you get one or two people that can make it, then go for it, and either use this room, which will record, which is donated, and I forgot by who now, but and then I'm spacing
our German
out
friend
today. I'm
our
actually
German friend.
Yeah,
by our German colleague.
Yeah, I'm looking through the Hangouts, but anyway,
Felix donated this room.
Oh, right. So yeah, so I do just go ahead and encourage that if to go ahead and throw a topic in there. Of course, while we're sitting here right now, if we want to do a UX one before next, a month from today, then if people want to throw out some time the next week, I'm always happy to do UX, and I could show you my big Miro board of, although I don't know that mine would be as useful because mine is specifically focused on showing weights of arguments. And even though that's probably interesting to several people, I don't think that's the main UX thing that like Amanu and Carl are working on. So, but yeah.
So saying UX is very much a stretch.
I think it's
there always is a user experience. It just may not be good.
Yeah.
Like there's always testing. It just may be your customers that are doing.
Well, do people have to leave now, or what's the census? Should we
that's a good question.
Do next week, or should we talk now a little UX since that sounds interesting to people, or what's anyone have to leave right now?
No, but I had a long day and I have guests coming soon, so I would rather fold.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind adjourning, but do we want to then set up a ad hoc in a week from now?
Yeah, and if we want to just keep this time next Friday.
Same slot next week, UX, I'm all for it.
And I'll throw something on the calendar so there's a little reminder.
Yes.
Okay.
I can do 12 to 1.
Just last night, I put in a query to Perplexity and Elicit for some UX papers on infinite canvases and how you can increase bandwidth and comprehension, user comprehension. So I've got a list of papers. I haven't looked at them yet, but I have a list.
I'd like to check that out.
And Amanu, are you in the Slack already?
Yeah, I just joined.
I
Awesome.
invited him.
Lovely, lovely.
It was great meeting everyone here. This is amazing. I'm very hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy you joined.
Yes,
Yeah, thanks
welcome.
for joining us. All right. I'll see y'all next week.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Ciao, ciao.